There we go.
Yay, we made it. Okay.
So I would say, let's go through it at a pace that people feel comfortable with, make sure that if there's questions, you're getting a chance to ask them about what the language is doing. Just to refresh everyone's memory, we did work in some new wording in the cost and term section last week at one point. I don't remember who was here and who wasn't here. There were a couple of days when some people were out, maybe zooming in, maybe not. So some of you may not have been in the room anyway when we went over those changes. And then the second was adding some language related to definition of trade secrets. With that, I'll turn it over to you, David.
Sure. Good afternoon, David Hall, Legislative Council. You should be working from draft 5.1. No, I haven't stopped screen sharing. Well,
You need to get the right to repair that thing.
Rod, you win. Comic of the day.
Preparing for cabaret.
yeah,
Dry humor.
all right.
Good for you.
Say something about his thumb, Rodney.
It's just not happy with me.
Not a greeting card.
I was gonna say it sticks out like a sore thumb.
You guys are on a roll today. Good Lord.
Just waiting for his ride. Get out of this. What happened?
I cut the end of my thumb off.
With what?
A very sharp knife. Slicing a tomato.
Were you able to get it reattached at all?
My wife steri stripped it back on. She's used to it. This thumb I did with a wood splitter at the farm a few years ago. I guess while I'm waiting for this to work, I don't know if I ever told you all, thank you for the work that you do on behalf of Vermonters and farmers. My in-laws have been farming the same farmland in Williston since about 1787.
Oh.
They
Did Ethan
are nominally
ever board his horse there?
it's possible, you know. I've done all the property research and all the genealogy work. Dan Johnson came from Connecticut after he got off the boat in the early 1780s and founded the Johnson Farm. Unfortunately, they just last month stopped milking, but they still have some beef going and sugaring. And I'm just going to leave the meeting and come back. How about that? So I don't have any direct financial interest in the work that you're doing, but I at least can appreciate it from that perspective. And I was happy when I first started here to work on ag issues for many years, more directly than I do now. So thank you guys. All right, I'm allowed back in. That's good. No audio.
I don't know how many strikes you've had already, but I'm thinking the last strike, and if it doesn't work, we'll resort to our
own devices.
iPads and devices.
Your own devices. Wow. It's just
A witty bunch. They
really hitting your stride right just in time for cabaret. It's great.
Well, Representative Call has a intern here who reminded me of those are victims of a drive-by shooting.
What, Chuck?
We might want to go while I can.
Yeah, let's,
Well, that's after we're offline.
So again, draft 5.1,
and did you introduce yourself, David? I'm not sure we got your.
I did, but I'm happy to do it again.
No, go ahead.
Committee strike all amendment, and section 1 still short titling this Fair Repair Act. Section 2 still amending 9 VSA, actually it's adding 9 VSA chapter 106, agricultural equipment, fair repair. We still have a host of definitions in 4051, beginning with agricultural equipment, which I think is largely unchanged since we began our work. Authorized repair provider, pretty much still in the same shape since about draft 1 or 2.1. Documentation, still same language. Forestry equipment, you folks changed a little bit to in line 15 here to say used directly and principally in harvesting timber or for on-site processing of wood forest products. Independent repair provider, still the same person operating in the state who is not under an authorized repair arrangement. The original equipment manufacturer, person engaged in the business of selling, leasing, or supplying this equipment. Owner still means an individual or business that owns or leases agricultural or forestry equipment purchased or used in the state. Part still the same definition. Tools, still tools. Trade secret, as the chair indicated, began life as a cross-reference Title IX to the definition that lives in section 4601 there. And again, in case you weren't here for it, the way this changes is twofold. First, instead of that incorporation by reference, we're repopulating the actual definition here. So 10A is that definition from 9 VSA section 4601. But there is an addition to it where we say what a trade secret is not, and it is not a part, tool, or documentation that is necessary to perform diagnosis, maintenance, or repair of agroforest equipment, and that an OEM sells or otherwise makes available to an authorized repair provider in the ordinary course of business to perform that diagnosis, maintenance, or repair. Any questions on the definitions? That's all the definitions. The definitions used to have fair and reasonable in them, and we have moved that down to the construct in the next section where we say what the duty is and on what terms that duty must be fulfilled, right? So that's where the fair part comes in. Are we ready to move there? Oh, let's see a question. John.
So trade secret can have nothing to do with repairs?
Well, I'm not sure I would ever say nothing to do with, but I would say that the purpose of this definition is to set the expectation that you do not have a reasonable investment-backed expectation in maintaining the secrecy of part, tool, or documentation in this state if it's necessary to perform diagnosis, maintenance, or repair, and you're making that, part, tool, or documentation available to your authorized repair provider.
So in general, we would assume the making of that new equipment carries with it potentially trade secrets, right? As far as maybe how this machine operates, it does its job, but as far as fixing it goes, they're not trade secrets involved in that part of it.
I don't know if there are or there are not in the real world. I do not know the answer to that. I mean, if a trade secret means information, including a formula, pattern, compilation, program, device, method, technique, or process that derives independent economic value from not being generally known, is the subject to, trying to keep that information secret. That's how we define a trade secret. That's how the restatement defines trade secret. That's how most states probably define a trade secret. So the purpose here of including B and saying you don't have that expectation of privacy in this specific place, it's consistent with, or at least I think it's consistent with that portion of the Monsanto case that says, when we're talking about a regulatory environment, if you are aware that under that regulatory environment, what you may consider to be a trade secret is not going to have protection from disclosure, then you can't have a reasonable investment-backed expectation in its continued secrecy. Now, there are maybe issues with this bill that might cause problems, but the thing about a trade secret is it is intellectual property in which you have a cognizable legal interest. And, under the federal and state constitutions, you can't deprive somebody of property without just compensation. 4052 attempts to provide compensation in the event you do suffer a loss of property, intellectual or otherwise. So we're trying to cover all those bases and say, generally, don't expect this to remain secret. But we're also saying in 4052, if there's any ruling that there may be a taking involved here, you should, at least under the language, be able to avail yourself of just compensation, because we're saying you have to sell it on substantially the same terms as you would get, plus the possibility of additional costs. So we're trying to account for sort of both.
Good. All right. Shall we go on to 4052?
Okay. So availability of parts, tools, and documentation. So the duty here in A1, again, the duty in this chapter flows to that equipment manufacturer directly and says, you, as an OEM, shall offer for sale or otherwise make available to an independent repair provider or owner, as we've defined them above, the parts, tools, and documentation that you, the manufacturer, offer for sale or otherwise make available to an authorized repair. Stuff below, potentially terms.
David, hold on a second, we just lost the screen entirely.
Also lost the microphone, it looks like.
Yeah.
Great. Well, awesome. Live. Oh, it's back.
Yes, we do. Thinking.
That camera is,
It's going crazy.
Is that a camera or a mic?
Maybe both.
That's the camera there.
so I think if you think it's working, let's keep going then, and we'll hear from somebody soon enough if in fact it's not.
Right. Okay, so we were on page 5, subject to subsection C below for substantially the same cost.
Can you just back up again the data? I'm sorry, to A.
Yep.
Maybe go right up to the top of that section.
Sure.
Because we were, yeah,
You just tell me when you're ready to move down.
Sorry.
Just tell me when you're ready to vote.
I think we're good. Let's keep
Kidding.
rolling.
Good. So we're ready for 2?
Yep.
So subdivision 2 relates to those situations of an electronic security lock or function. It says part of the package of parts, tools, equipment that you have to make available include the ability to unlock the lock and reset it once you're complete with the diagnosis, maintenance, or repair. That was in the underlying proposal. And then 3, again, just to be crystal clear here, 3 says the manufacturer may conform with this duty, may meet the requirement either directly or B, through an authorized repair provider if permitted by an agreement between the manufacturer and the dealer or provider.
So in this case, the OEM has 2 options in order to meet the duty.
They may have 2 options. They always have the option to just directly supply it. B says, if we're not going to violate your underlying franchise agreement, license agreement, whatever, then we can make it available through an authorized provider. Any questions on that? I know this has been point of question before. Nope. Good. All right. So under B, specifically now it's talking about the terms. This is, largely the same as it's been since the beginning. Under the terms governing the sale or provision of parts, tools, and documentation, the manufacturer shall not impose upon an independent repair provider or owner. We've got no substantial obligation to use or restriction on the use of parts, tools, documentation necessary to do the repair, including conditions that you become an authorized repair provider, conditions that you require any of it to be registered, paired with, or pre-approved by either a manufacturer or authorized provider before it becomes operational. 2, you can't impose an additional cost or burden that is not reasonably necessary or is designed to be an impediment on the independent repair provider or owner. And 3, you can't impose an additional burden or material change that adversely affects the timeliness or method of delivering parts, tools, or documentation. The construct, remember here, is to try to bring some uniformity to what's fair, what's reasonable, what's required for parts, tools, documentation across the board, no imposition of any sort of unreasonable conditions. On the cost side, and this is a little bit different than where this bill started, remember, because it used to be sort of a 3-tiered approach on cost where parts were fair to the parties, tools were at the lowest possible price, and then documentation had to be free. You guys took a step and said, well, sometimes documentation costs money, let's add that in. But this brings us to the point of saying, across the board, parts, tools, and equipment, it's got to be under 1A, fair to both parties, considering the agreed upon conditions, quality, and timeliness. It has to include discounts, rebates, or other incentives authorized to authorized repair providers in the OEM's normal course of business. But under 2, an OEM may impose an additional charge for parts, tools, or documentation if and only to the extent to which the manufacturer incurs additional costs to make parts, tools, and documentation available for sale or otherwise available to the independents or owners. Or B, the parties agree to some material change in cost or terms, and that additional charge is reasonably related to the additional costs arising from the change. So there's been questions about 2A. What is the potential scope of that? I don't know the answer. I don't think from this committee's discussions and from what I've tried to bring back to you, it means something as expansive as, well, we had to set up a whole new distribution system and we're going to start charging people 400% more than we other would to recover those costs. I think it's more like it costs extra to ship it beyond to Vermont. We normally just ship to New York or Pennsylvania, but if we're going to send it to Vermont, that's going to cost more we shouldn't have to lose money on it. We should be able to get it there, but it really is trying to set up that parity between what it actually costs you to supply your authorized repair provider, what it actually costs you to supply an independent repair provider or an owner.
Yep, good.
Any other questions on this piece, 4052, otherwise?
I just have a
John.
general question. So, really, I can see the United Ag and Turf John Deere dealership in Tocoroca. And pretty sure in their ad say, bring in any make of tractor and we'll fix it. So if this passed, you could be both an authorized dealer and an independent shop so that United Ag and Turf John Deere dealership have access to diagnostic equipment tools, have parts from all the other OEMs.
It's if they request it. So your status as authorized or independent is not determined by this law, but by what arrangement you have with the manufacturer. So yeah, it's theoretically possible you could be authorized for purposes of John Deere tractors. You would be independent for purposes of pick another brand, Kubota or whatever. And you would, just by getting Kubota's or Mahindra's documentation or parts doesn't make you an authorized repair provider. Only you can set that up with them by a franchise agreement, right? But it does allow you the same access as an authorized Kubota dealer would have to the same parts, tools, and documentation.
Representative Grant.
So this whole bill does not put any restrictions on a dealership, right? I mean, you can't go to the dealership and say, you have to sell me this part. Or this tool, or this diagnostic. The dealer could say, no, you gotta contact the manufacturer.
The way this chapter is written, yes, it's the latter circumstance. So if it's not part of their manufacturer dealer agreement to provide other people, sell other people parts or provide them with the tools, then the dealer could absolutely say, this duty does not apply to me under that provision of Vermont law. This duty applies to my manufacturer. And if you want the parts, go see them. And if you want the tools, go talk to them. And if you want the diagnostics, go get them. I don't have to give that to you. That's the scope of this duty.
Okay, I am looking around, not seeing hands, so can.
All right. So enforcement, this is stock language that has been here since the beginning, but remember that the construct is the one we use for other consumer protection violations. So we're saying that by violating a provision of this law is a de jure, is a legal violation of 9 VSA 2453. And that brings with it the mechanics of enforcing consumer protection laws. So state's attorneys, attorney generals can bring civil actions, do investigations, seek assurances of discontinuance, impose penalties. It also brings in a private right of action for a consumer who has suffered harm due to a violation of the consumer protection law. And that includes a possibility of treble damages and attorney's fees and costs. So that is the full boat of options under the CPA.
Consumer Protection Act.
Yes.
Okay.
Any questions? All right.
One question, Representative Graham.
So I'm just trying to get this straight in my head, but, so let's say, independent repair provider or lane customer wants to purchase the diagnostic tools from the manufacturer. But because manufacturer has to ship it some other place, it's gonna cost them more, ship it, they can charge more, right?
Yes.
So there's nothing that where they can say, well, you sold it to the dealership for less. But now I gotta pay more because of shipping. But
At this point, the way the duty in 4052 is written, it says that the manufacturer should be able to recoup the additional cost of supplying the independent or the owner. It wasn't the case as originally written, but it is the case now that it should be substantially the same terms and costs, but they should be able to impose an additional charge that is reasonably related to and is to the extent of their additional cost. Okay, looking around, anybody? Okay, all right. Are you ready to move on to 4054?
So,
Okay, so this is the application limitations. So this chapter does not require an original equipment manufacturer to divulge a trade secret to an owner or an independent service provider. Now, that has to be obviously read in conjunction with the way you've defined trade secret. This chapter does not alter the terms of any arrangement described above. That's the authorized repair provider arrangement. That includes the provision of a performance of warranty or recall work by an authorized repair provider on behalf of an OEM pursuant to the arrangement, except that any provision governing such an arrangement that purports to waive, avoid, restrict, or limit the OEM's obligations to comply with this chapter is void and unenforceable.
Representative Graham.
so if an independent repairer, the owner, thinks they can fix the tractor, gets a special tool, tries, fails, does the dealership or the manufacturer have to honor a warranty?
I do not know the answer to that. It depends on what the warranty says. And I don't have any idea what the warranty says.
Representative Lipscomb.
To follow up on Representative Graham's, what if the manufacturer holds that, you know, you actually did more damage trying to repair it,
Sure.
and maybe you fried the computer box or whatever. And so that's your responsibility. And that portion of the warranty is void. If it was under warranty.
Sure. Again, I mean, if your question is specific to, would this, still be covered by a warranty after you do the work and you mess it up? I don't know the answer to that. I don't know what the warranty provisions say. Maybe they disclaim it. I'm not sure. If your question is beyond warranty work, if you got the part, the tool, the documentation, tried the repair, made it worse, I mean, two parties can always disagree, but I guess on its face, I would say that the person who attempted the repair is on the hook to probably cover the cost of that. But again, that depends on the facts and circumstances of every case.
John.
If I was a mechanic at an authorized dealer and I have to go to school to get some training to use either the tools or read the diagnostic stuff, documentation, does that count as a tool? Like, would there be any responsibility for John Deere, say, to, if I was a logger and I said, I can't understand this equipment, it takes training, you're obligated, if I want to pay, say, at that cost for training, does John Deere have to have those, do they have to make training available?
That's a really good question. And I don't think that the language of this bill is explicit enough to answer that question. I think you could argue that either way, and I don't know how that would play out. Because on the one hand, we're trying to set up parity in the terms. On the other hand, that might not be possible without the training. And so is there a duty? Does that mean that part of their duty is offer the training? Somebody could probably argue that. They would probably argue against it. And I don't think this is explicit on that point. I think it's a good question.
Representative Graham.
So I think what they do at this point in time is you have a training somewhere in the United States. And it's a dealer's responsibility to send someone, pay for the flight out and back and accommodations at stand to attend that training. It could be in Texas, it could be in Michigan, it could be
Sure.
Pennsylvania, it depends on where it is. So, I think that's how they do it now, so I don't.
So in that circumstance, I agree would be that the cost of, if that had to happen, would be imposed on the independent or on the owner. The question though is, do we have to allow you to participate in our training? I don't know. I don't know. I mean.
So the question is whether the language as written includes or covers this idea of training under tools or documentation. That was your question, John, whether as it's currently drafted here, it's clearly in or not in. And it sounds like, David, you're saying possibly open to interpretation. And then having established that, we're asking, well, what would that look like? Okay. Jed.
Yeah, this is a comment, not a question, but that training has never been, in the month we've been working on this, has never come up as a goal to the bill that we've been discussing. So I don't consider that. I mean, if we want to go out another week or two and think that it's intelligent to expand the scope of this bill, then that's the committee's decision. But I don't think that's been a relevant ask to our task in this bill heretofore.
Yeah, I would agree that, I will say that we did hear, it's not the first time it's been raised, but I feel like the intent has not been to include that. And when we've been talking about it, I would agree, we haven't been thinking how this includes that. John, did you want to follow up or are you?
I mean, from what I understand of sort of computer world, right, that so much of it involves training to use these tools. And, some mechanics may be able to find online that sort of training. I don't know, but it's not the same as, sort of mechanical stuff you can figure out at home. It's much more, right, you got to go to John Deere school.
Yeah. Yeah, all right, well.
We'll probably have this discussion in the future too, of like, where does that sort of training service fit into those sort of buckets of, is it a tool, is it
documentation?
Right, an accessory somehow?
Yep, other thoughts? If anyone has them. Okay, Representative Lipsky.
Just a comment that's come up a lot, there are a lot of independent and I've dealt with them, mechanics that do understand these control panels. And they're just wise to the modern equipment and deal with it all the time. As an owner, I have none of those skills, but I don't think we've talked to and heard testimony from folks, whether it's at Longview or whatever, that deal with these control panels all the time. It's just getting access to clearing codes or diagnosing. So again, I stand that I don't think that that's necessary to get into that whole new level to have this bill have some positive effect for independents or independent owners. End of comment.
Representative Levitt.
I agree with Judd. I just, all the testimony we took wasn't about people wanting training. It was about wanting to just be able to clear the codes themselves. They knew how to fix it. They could clean the pistons, but they couldn't get the tractor running because they couldn't clear the code. So, yeah. What he said.
More eloquently, though.
Yeah.
It's a world we know nothing about. I mean, I was talking to my brother-in-law who's an excavator and has dump trucks, and he said, for example, a lot of, people who use big diesel equipment now, they can hook their engine up and meanwhile contact essentially a hacker in China who can adjust the codes to increase the horsepower in that. So it's
Yeah, and that's not what we're
what can be
doing.
done. Yeah.
Did we get to the very bottom here, David?
I thought so.
Got the effective date.
Yeah, we did.
Okay, we did cover the effective date. Okay, then we are at the bottom, I guess, yeah. That's for the signature line.
On the vote.
Okay, well, I feel like we had the conversation we need to have and wonder if anybody would like to offer a motion. If so, it would be a motion to amend the bill using this particular draft 5.1. And then we would have a second vote. You may recall us doing this earlier on the amended bill. And David, I remember having a conversation, not with you, but with one of your colleagues, saying some committees don't do it that way, but I think that's the right way to do it, to have two votes.
I leave that in the able hands of the clerk's office. I don't know.
Okay. Interesting. Okay, so that was parenthetic. Would anyone like to offer a motion then on draft 5.1?
So is this a committee vote?
No, this is not a committee bill. It will be an amendment. So if we vote it out, it will be H81 amended with this language. So we're not starting from scratch with a new bill number.
But I guess I'm confused how is this gonna move now that we've been through crossover.
Oh, okay, sorry, I understand. Yeah, well, it will, if we vote it out, it will go to the floor. It may go to another committee. I expect it will go to another committee. And then if it's voted out of that committee, then it would go on the calendar. We would, if the body passes it, it would go to the other body. And then to your question, if that other body would not be able to vote on it this year, this session, unless they change their rules.
Are you still looking for a motion?
I think I am.
So I move that we amend the bill in order to incorporate the language as listed in draft 5.1.
I second the motion.
The clerk will commence to call the roll on the amendment.
2 minutes.
You gotta do the first vote.
Yeah,
I moved away the 2 minutes.
Who's first?
Representative Esme Cole.
Yes.
Representative Rodney Graham.
No,
Representative Josie Levitt.
Yes.
Representative Jed Lipsky.
Yes,
Representative John O'Brien.
Yes.
Representative Henry Pearl. Yes. Representative Mike Rice.
yes,
Representative Heather Supernaut.
Yes.
Representative David Templeman.
Yes.
Representative Charles Wilson.
No.
Representative David Durfee.
Yes.
The vote tally on the amendment is 9-2-0.
Okay, thank you. Now, would someone like to offer a motion, vote on the bill as amended? H81.
I make a motion, we vote on H81 as amended.
Second.
All
I have a
right.
question on process. Is there any discussion on the motion that's on the committee floor at this?
We can
time?
take it, we can have a discussion if, did you care to raise a?
Yeah, I just want to make it clear, you know, people say this is my vote, and I'd like to explain why. But yesterday I was at a legislative event down in Jeffersonville. There were a lot of Farm Bureau folks there, and they were sort of not pleased with this. It was sort of a surprise. That's one comment. But my vote in the affirmative is based on testimony given to this committee by both users, owners of equipment, predominantly agricultural, but both forestry field and agricultural field. And I was particularly focused on those actual users and owners that were Vermont owners and Vermont businesses. And I want to point out that I would say 82% approximately of those people that testified supported this bill, felt that it would get them out of emergency situations quicker than any other alternative. And there were those that felt that it imperiled the valued distributors of equipment that we have in this state. And it was not our or their, in anyone's interest to imperil any of those valued distributors here. So I support this bill because of how it may positively impact many people are in these narrow windows, whether it's harvesting wood and mud season's coming or the crops down in the computer screen. So I'm really responding to the Vermont folks, not the Nebraskans or the Iowa folks that testified so much, but the Vermont folks. So that's why I'm voting to support this bill.
All right, the clerk may call the roll.
All right. Representative Esme Cole.
Yes.
Representative Rodney Graham.
no,
Representative Josie Levitt.
Yes.
Representative Jed Lipsky.
Affirmative, yes.
Representative John O'Brien.
Yes.
Representative Henry Pearl. Yes. Representative Mike Rice.
Yes.
Representative Heather Supernaut.
Yes.
Representative David Templeman.
Yep.
Representative Charles Wilson.
No.
Representative David Durfee.
Yes.
The vote tally is 9-2-0.
All right, thank you.
All right.
Representative Templeman will be reporting the bill, so Alora, you can connect on how that gets shared with the clerk's office.
Very good.
There's a little bit of process that has to be followed there. Thank you, David.
Thank you.
Thanks, David.
Yeah, thank you, Counselor.
Copies of sharp knives.
Heal up.
So I think we can shut down this part of the meeting here. We will at 2. And let's be right back at 2, get ready to go. We've got Mike O'Grady coming in. And we're going to first hear Heather, Representative Supernaut, walk us through H368 and then introduce it to us. And then Mike O'Grady will just go through the language with us this afternoon.
Okay.
I don't think it'll be a late afternoon.
Chairman Durfee, I need to leave now.